Afternoon, everyone. This world is steadily moving toward critical mass. It is already tilting toward anarchy in several locations. The Bible said this would happen. Let's turn to 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1. God inspired Paul to go into this prophecy. It says, 2 Timothy 3 and verse 1, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come." And we are living in the last days, and perilous times are here. Very dangerous times. There are several categories you can look at to bear this out. Natural disasters, for instance. If you go back just a little over a year, you will remember the horrible earthquake that hit the island of Haiti. And they have nowhere near even started to really thoroughly recover from that. Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people lost their life. Even the presidential palace was turned into a shambles. Now just think, people living on that island probably got up one morning, here's a beautiful Caribbean day, the sun, the clouds, the air, and all of a sudden, devastation hits from out of nowhere and changed everything. The island will never be what it was before. Not too long after that, an earthquake hit the country of Chile. Very powerful earthquake. What fascinates me is what we're told that these big, powerful earthquakes, they are miles down in the ground. And yet they have such an enormous impact on the surface of the earth and on the ocean, creating waves and destruction, moving surfaces of the earth in one direction or another, which occurred in Chile. But who thinks about Chile now? And then, not too long ago, in a major city in New Zealand, Christchurch, an earthquake hit downtown. You don't ever hear about that city anymore because other news has pushed it off of the radar screen, but they haven't even really made a whole lot of headway in recovering from that earthquake in that city in New Zealand. And then we're all familiar with what's happened in Japan. Once again, people getting up and going about their day and carrying on, and just a routine day, and all of a sudden, a 9.0 earthquake on the Richter scale strikes the island of Japan. And it'll never be the same in Japan again. Tremendous devastation. They don't even know how many people died or how many people are missing yet. And it created a tsunami that came sweeping in and just wiped everything out in its path. And that tsunami was felt in California and felt over in Hawaii. They said that out in the ocean, it was traveling 500 miles an hour. Imagine if you're in an airplane and you're on a trans-Pacific flight and you look down off the wing and you're maybe doing 450, 500 miles an hour and this huge wave is keeping up with you. Generated by that earthquake. And you know about the nuclear reactors there and how it just keeps on spewing out radioactivity. And now authorities are telling us that it's showing up in the U.S. in certain places. They're saying it's not at a dangerous spot yet, but it's showing up in our food chain, in the air and in the milk. It lands on the grass, the cows eat the grass, it shows up in the milk that you pick up at the store and drink. Now, they're saying it's not at a dangerous level yet, but that if something isn't done within a month, it will begin to be rather dangerous, even over here. So the U.S. is sending over cement pumps to try to seal it off the way they did the nuclear meltdown in Chernobyl. Now just go back a little ways. This hadn't even happened, but now it's happened. It really happened. What's coming? What's coming that hasn't happened yet in the next year or two? We do indeed live in dangerous and perilous times. You know, there was a time when the world was more compartmentalized, and what happened somewhere else didn't really affect us that much over here. There was a song, over there, over there, over there, seems so far away. Now the economy and communications and travel and politics are so interlocked and connected all around the globe that when there's a financial disaster somewhere else, it affects our finances here and vice versa. Let's take the U.S., for instance. In our areas where we live, we can blot all of this out and just plant our gardens and go get our groceries and enjoy the beautiful day and get a good night's sleep and get up the next morning and keep on going. But what's happening in the other areas of the world and in other areas of the United States of America is affecting us. Just look at what's taking place in terms of our military. Here they are still in Afghanistan, 10 years later, just grinding it out, grinding it out, grinding it out, trying to prop up a corrupt regime from top to bottom that undermines our military effort. The poppy fields are planted and they grow and they're harvested, and heroin is sent around the world. I think 80% of the heroin in the world comes from Afghanistan, and another year slides by and our soldiers stay over there and they keep fighting, and we keep pumping blood, money, and treasure into that country. And then there's Iraq. Supposedly, we're drawing down and we'll be out of there. And about the time we start hearing that, the Shiites attack the Sunnis, and the Sunnis attack the Shiites, and the mosque is blown up, and then the leadership there is saying, well, you can't leave just yet. And so there our soldiers are in Iraq, and our money, and our material, and the cost just keeps on mounting up. In South Korea, since the Korean armistice, quote unquote, we've had a rather large contingent on the South Korean peninsula. I think it's something like 30,000 soldiers and all of the support logistics that go with those soldiers and material and equipment, just draining us of manpower, money, and material and treasure. And now comes Libya. Libya, a country that is made up of tribes that hate one another and will kill one another when they're turned loose and allowed to do so. But there was an uprising there, and now we've intervened with NATO to try to protect the population. But we've supposedly turned the main operation over to NATO, but the weight and load is still being carried by the United States of America. And the money is primarily coming from here. I saw a report on the news that said we're up to $550 million now, headed toward $1 billion that it could cost us from the intervention in Libya. And it goes on and on. What next? Are we going to get involved in Syria? Are we going to get involved in Yemen and Tunisia? Will it come to rescuing the population in other Arab countries? They don't like us. They hate us. They despise us, but we go and rescue them. Who are we rescuing? They're saying now that some of our enemies are in the opposition forces trying to overthrow Gaddafi, who is an arch enemy and who has killed Americans before. Internally in the United States of America, you take a look at just about anywhere you want to look. Politics. We have political turmoil. I get to where I can't even watch it. It's so sickening. It's just constant back and forth in Washington, D.C. between this party, this senator, that senator, and toing and froing about this, that, and the other thing. Instead of working together and instead of somehow or the other coming to compromise and coming to agreement and moving forward on things, it seems like this gets shut down and that gets shut down. And the rhetoric has been turned up to where it's almost vile sometimes, and frankly is. We're told about the drug war on our southern border, and it's also opening up on the border to the north. And we're told that the United States of America is now going to have to start seriously considering putting the military with military weapons down on our border because the police and the Border Patrol are outmanned and outgunned. And we're also told that the Mexican drug cartels have now infiltrated into the country and have set up operations in every major city in the United States of America now. When you look at the debt, we're drowning in debt, absolutely drowning. We keep talking about raising the debt ceiling and raising it more, and there's this big battle. Do we raise it or do we cut costs? And they throw $14 trillion around, and I saw a report the other day that tried to explain how much $14 trillion were, and they kind of did it with blocks, and they started out, well, here's how much 1,000 is. Here's how much a million is. It stretched a long way. Here's how much $1 billion is, and it went way out there. And then when they showed $1 trillion, it was just out of sight. You can't even comprehend $1 trillion. And they're saying the deficit is going to go to $14 trillion and rising. We have huge liabilities with China, with Japan, and even with the UK. And what is the solution? There doesn't seem to be a solution in sight to this growing quagmire of financial bankruptcy appearing larger and larger on the horizon for the United States of America. At the bottom of this, of course, we know that as a country, we and other countries that are the descendants of Jacob, and of course other countries that are not, but in particular, if you look at what God mainly is concerned with right now, the countries that comprise the descendants of Israel have become morally bankrupt. Morally bankrupt. And if you try to get to the bottom of that, you're going to end up right in the home and right in the family, because that's where it starts. And from there, it goes out into the churches and into the business community and into the various aspects and organizations and institutions of our society, education, politics, military, police force, and we could go on. Morally bankrupt. This is clearly described in the book of Isaiah. Let's turn to Isaiah chapter 1 and start in verse 3. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 3, "The ox knows his owner, and the donkey his master's crib, but Israel does not know. Israel does not know. My people does not consider. Ah, sinful nation." The whole nation is called a sinful nation. A people laden with iniquity. Now, isn't that true? That's not an exaggeration. You see it in the movies. You see it on television. You see it in entertainment. You see it in business. You see it everywhere. A people laden with iniquity. I find it fascinating. I try to read the Wall Street Journal regularly, and I find it fascinating when I go over to the left and just go down to the column that summarizes the articles you'll find in the paper. And virtually every issue of the Wall Street Journal, you will find several examples of people who have been charged with corruption and who are having trials or who are going to trial or who are going to be indicted. Insider trading and manipulation and illegal collusion with another company. And it just goes on and on and on all the time, every day. And those are just the things that are published in the paper. What about the things that are uncharged? In other words, they're not caught. A people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. Not just corrupt, but they are corrupters. They have forsaken the eternal. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backward. Why should you be stricken any more? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even unto the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. Doesn't that describe it perfectly? It certainly does. If you set out to become acquainted with someone who is truthful, someone who has integrity, principles, morals, and standards, someone who is normal and balanced and fun to be around and try to do the right thing, how many of those people are you going to find? I'm not saying you won't ever find one, but how many? Now, there are people who say, well, I just wish it was the way it used to be. Well, there are some things that were better when you go back far enough. There are some things. Neighboring seemed to be better. People who wanted to try to do the right thing seemed to be more numerous. But you just start investigating the way it was, quote unquote, back then, and you're going to find the same thing you read about right here, except it's not on as grand a scale because there were not as many people and we had not degenerated as far as we have now. But you know, it says right in the Bible, don't be touting the good old days. Don't be touting the good old days. I remember the good old days. No, the critical mass was not there that's there now. But I'll tell you, there was evil, violence, corruption, terrible people doing terrible things to others, no doubt about it. So we need to look forward to the good days of the kingdom of God, not backward out of nostalgia to the supposed Hollywood presentation of the good old days back then. I see occasionally pictures that show the old cars and the old cities and the old houses of the 1930s, 40s, 50s. They're just clean and so well kept. I don't remember the cars being that clean and polished, and the streets being that clean, and the houses being that manicured, and the yards being that wonderful. Maybe occasionally. They're not what they're touted to be. When it came to people relating to people, better in many cases, but still bad in other cases. Let's notice Hosea chapter 4. Here's another description of the times in which we live, and particularly in Israel, or the descendants of Israel. Hosea chapter 4. We live in perilous times, dangerous times. Hosea chapter 4 and verse 1. Hear the word of the Eternal, you children of Israel. For the Lord has a controversy, or a charge, against the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth. Now, I didn't write this. God inspired Hosea to write it. Where are you going to find the truth today? The whole truth and nothing but the truth. Where? In the churches? In the courts? In the Congress? In the neighborhoods? There is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. I'm shocked at how quickly what we're just reading here has come to pass. I'm shocked at how rapidly God and the interest of God and the teaching of God and His way have just evaporated. Nor knowledge of God in the land, verse 2, Hosea 4. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out and blood touches blood. Isn't that a perfect description of our society today? It certainly is. You talk to any policeman that will talk to you, and that's what he's going to tell you. You talk to anybody that knows what they're talking about that has anything to do with hospitals, this is what they're going to tell you. They have to treat all this stuff that shows up at the emergency ward. Isn't that very graphic? By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out and blood touches blood. Another translation says they break all restraints, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. You hear this fancy, glib thing, no borders, no boundaries, no restrictions, no constraints. You feel like doing it, do it. Go for it. Well, it was prophesied it would get that way. They break out, or they break all restraints. And now drop down to verse 6 of Hosea 4. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. We just read that there's no knowledge of God in the land, and therefore my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you, that you shall be no priest to me. The ministers are going to be rejected and are being rejected because they've rejected the knowledge of God and they put their own spin on it. And the people are being rejected because they too have rejected knowledge. Seeing you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. As they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore will I change their glory into shame. This is going to happen more and more and more. It is happening. It's going on in any direction you look. And it's getting bigger and bigger and more widespread, what we just read there. We all know this. And it's going to continue. Look at what God said here in Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 1. I thought of the political situation where nowadays we seem to be perpetually in some political election. It just seems to be going on all the time. And it's gotten to where now they said it's going to cost something like $1 billion for us to have the next president elected. And forget it about running for office if you don't have money. Just notice Jeremiah chapter 5 and verse 1. Run you to and fro through the streets of Jerusalem, and see now and know and seek in the broad places thereof, if you can find a man. If there be any that executes justice or judgment, that seeks the truth, and I will pardon it. Okay, let's just think about this. God told Jeremiah, I want you to go to and fro through the streets, and I want you to look for somebody who practices justice, who seeks the truth. You find one, and I will respond to that. Could you? Could I? You can find friendly people. You can find nice people. You can find people that are generous. You can find people that will help. But if you push it and go a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, how many people at school, how many people at work, how many people in the community, how many people anywhere you want to look, if you really get through and down into the heart of the matter, into where the way they are is embedded deep, can you find someone that really stands tall for justice and that seeks the truth? I'm not saying you won't find one. I'm saying it's so rare, he says, see if you can find a man who's that way. And though they say the Lord lives, surely they swear falsely. Oh, they sound good, and they throw my name around. But that's all they do. Verse 3, O Lord, are not your eyes upon the truth? You have stricken them, but they have not grieved. You have consumed them, but they have refused to receive correction. They have made their faces harder than a rock. They have refused to return. Who receives correction? Who takes correction? Who wants correction? Who appreciates correction anywhere today so that they can correct a problem and everything works out better? It doesn't go over well when you try to correct someone today. How do we feel? How do you feel when you are corrected? How do I feel when I'm corrected? Many people, when they're faced with this, they make their faces harder than a rock. And when it comes to being corrected by God, their necks get stiffer and their faces get harder than a rock. Who in the world today is asking when natural disasters strike? And of course, I hadn't even gone into the tornadoes and the hurricanes and the fires just in the last year or two in this country. Who, when those things hit, do you hear saying, I wonder if we need to learn something from this? I wonder if I need to change something. I wonder if I'm being told something here. Now, you'll see somebody blaming others and even blaming God. And you'll see someone isolating a group and saying it's because of them that this happened. But how many people today say, you know what, I wonder if I ought to take a look and see if maybe we're being told something here. Maybe this is coming because of certain problems that are so rampant in my home, in my life, in this community, in this nation, in this world today. It says here, they've refused to receive correction. And that's the world we live in today. Let's go over here to Amos, Amos chapter 4. As we read these powerful verses in the Bible, and we look at how they apply nationally, and we look at how they apply internationally, I also recommend that each one of us, including myself, look and see if maybe they apply in our own individual lives. And I think we'll probably find that there are places where they do. In other words, how hard is it for God to get a point across to each one of us? Can he do it through a sermon? Can he do it through a sermonette? Can he do it through Bible study? Can he do it through an occurrence or an event that we have happen? I'm not saying we ought to be hard on ourselves and we ought to begin to just get down on ourselves. That's not the point, and that's not what God means. And sometimes things will happen that are not our fault at all, but we can still learn from it. But still, it would be good to examine and think, well, now what can I learn that maybe needs to be changed as a result of this? And maybe you won't find anything. But then again, maybe I will and maybe you will. Notice Amos chapter 4 and verse 6. And I also have given you cleanness of teeth in all your cities. That means hunger. And want of bread in all your places. That means not enough to eat. Yet have you not returned unto me, says the Eternal. Isn't it something the way a horrible thing can happen and some people will all of a sudden decide, I'm going to get back to church and I'm going to start crying out to God. And so they do for a while. But then that starts to wear off and then that's the end of it. But to fully return to God, to fully get the point, to fully yield to Him, it's not happening. And also I have withholden the rain from you when there were yet 3 months to the harvest, and I caused it to rain upon one city, and caused it not to rain upon another city. One piece was rained upon, and the piece whereupon it rained not withered. So 2 or 3 cities wandered unto one city to drink water, but they were not satisfied. Yet have you not returned unto me, says the Eternal. I was reading in the paper the other day that all of this rain and snow out in California, you would think all the reservoirs are now full, and the lakes and the streams and deep snowpack up in the mountains. When it starts melting, the drought is over and the water supply needs are satisfied fully on the West Coast, and especially in California. And I was reading in the paper about Lake Mead, And how many people draw their water from Lake Mead? 30-something million people depend on Lake Mead for their water. That means Las Vegas. It means huge cities. And with all of the rain and all of the water, it's still not up to where it was before. It's gone up a little, but it's still at a dangerous level. But do you hear about anyone crying out to God, praying to God, beseeching God? Now I well remember when over in Atlanta, the lake that supplies water for Atlanta started going dry. That's a big lake. And I used to fly in over that lake, and it's just sprawling and deep and has a lot of water in it. But it started going down, 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 and getting to where it was not going to supply enough water for the city of Atlanta, which is getting to be a huge city. And so I remember on the news, the mayor and others called for a prayer vigil and called for a fast, and let's beseech God, and let's ask him to show us what we need to learn and to please intervene and please give us water. I remember that happening. And it went along a little while, and it started raining, and raining, and raining, and raining, and raining, and raining. And now, the last I heard, and I haven't checked it recently, that lake is full, and there's not a water problem there now. Did God see that and hear that? I'm not one to say he didn't. It's so rare, maybe he did. But do we see that widespread in our country today? I don't. I don't even see it in the churches or hear about it in the churches. That's what God's saying here. Verse 9, I have smitten you with blasting and mildew. You know, in the farming area, we've just come to where we accept pest and blight and disease and every kind of bug imaginable that attacks all of our crops. It didn't used to be that way if you go far enough back. You had the boll weevil and others, but now just about any crop you want to mention has an enemy in the world of insects and parasites and bugs and botch and blight and mildew and rot. And every year, here comes the enemy to hit the orange groves and the grapefruits and the apples and the vegetable crops and so on. It's just a way of life. So you got to spray and try to keep control. And the bugs that survive get to be super bugs. And now you got to up the spray and make them more deadly. And now it gets to where it is so deadly, and I've seen this, you have people on tractors riding along with these huge spray pumps just shooting this deadly stuff out like that, and they look like they are in a radioactive zone. Every inch of their skin is covered, and they're looking through goggles in a helmet. Here's a farmer riding this tractor, doesn't have a straw hat on and a piece of hay in his mouth, whistling "You Are My Sunshine" or singing "You Are My Sunshine." He's suited up and squirting poison in every direction, and it's so deadly, he's got to be completely covered. I have smitten you with blasting and mildew. When your gardens and your vineyards and your fig trees and your olive trees increased, the palmer worm devoured them. Yet have you not returned unto me, says the Eternal. I have sent among you the pestilence after the manner of Egypt. Your young men have I slain with the sword, and I have taken away your horses. And I have made the stink of your camps to come up unto your nostrils. Yet have you not returned unto me, says the Eternal. I have overthrown some of you as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. You were as a firebrand plucked out of the burning, yet have you not returned unto me, says the Eternal. Look how often that phrase keeps coming up. I've done this and done this and done this, yet you have not returned unto me. I hope that's not what God finds when he works with us. I hope we're so responsive, so quickly, and so teachable, that we really get the point and we change. Therefore, thus will I do unto you, O Israel, and because I will do this unto you, prepare to meet your God, O Israel. For lo, he that formeth the mountains, and created the wind, and declared unto man what is his thought, that makes the morning darkness, and treads upon the high places of the earth, the Eternal, the God of hosts, is his name. And you better return to him. And that's the message. Now, individually and as a church, we are returning unto him. And it's very heartening and interesting and inspiring to see. We've got to keep at it. But in Israel as a whole and out in the world, I see no return back to the Eternal, but a going away from him, creating their own brand of religion and their own way of worshiping, and therefore worshiping him in vain. That's what I see everywhere. And it doesn't matter what God does or says, this world will not change. It's not happening. It doesn't matter what earthquake hits where. You know, I just read in the paper the other day that there's a nuclear reactor on a fault line a few miles from downtown Manhattan, New York, And if the earthquake that hit in Japan were to hit there and cause the havoc that it caused there, that in a 30-mile circle there'd be 33 million people in big trouble. I hadn't given a whole lot of thought to radioactivity until now. That stuff is so insidious and so deadly, and it goes everywhere and contaminates everything. Imagine if that type of earthquake hit that reactor in New York City. What would happen then? Say, well, that's there, we're here. No, it would affect everybody all over the world. The financial centers, the communication centers, and I could go on. Yet have you not returned unto me. Doesn't matter what God does and says, this world will not change, except in one way, and it is changing in one way. It's getting worse and worse. You know it. It's a fact. We need to take note of it. Now, my question to all of us, including me, is this. Are we watching? Are we noticing? Are we taking into account what's happening in our society and in the world today? It is very sobering. It should be very sobering to each and every one of us. We ought to be giving some serious thought to what we see and hear and find out about in terms of world events. We don't need to be depressed. We don't need to be discouraged. We don't need to dwell on this. We don't need to grind away at it, but we do need to be aware of it, and we ought to be sobered by it from time to time because it's not going away. Not going away. And it is very sobering. Let's turn to Amos chapter 3 and verse 7. Amos 3 and verse 7. This is something Almighty God has already done. It says here in Amos 3 and verse 7, surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he reveals his secret unto his servants, the prophets. So, God always gives a warning through his servants, the prophets. Now, Mr. Armstrong has said we don't have any prophets in the Philadelphia era of the church. So how are we going to get the warning from God through his prophets? We already have it. It's right here in the Bible. 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy, and a good part of it was given by prophets. So he has revealed his secret unto his servants, the prophets, and they have recorded those prophecies right here in the Bible. We don't need prophets to utter new prophecies. We have enough prophecies. Thank you very much. But what we have to do is we have to be reading what his prophets have said and watching as more and more of the prophecies are unfolding before our eyes and being fulfilled, and try to understand them more fully and take heed. But I want to caution everybody. This must be done with wisdom and balance and perspective. I have a particular distaste for people who spin prophecy in order to scare people and trying to get them to attend services or send their money in or save their skin. That's not what prophecy's for. Prophecy is here to remind us, to call to our attention, to help us to take heed, to keep a balance, not to get so distracted in our everyday rush, and forget, wait a minute, we're living in the end time. Wait a minute, these things are happening. Wait a minute, it's going to get more so. I better really, really examine myself and take a look at what I'm doing in my spiritual life. It can be very motivating. But God does not reveal these things through his servants, the prophets, and therefore through his ministers in his church today, so we can get caught up in what I call prediction addiction. No. We're wasting our time when we start trying to set dates and assign names to people and lay out charts that tell us, well, it's going to happen here, and this means that, and that means that, and that means that. I'm not going to take time to go into it now, but I'll touch on it. One of the first things I noticed when I started attending services in 1959 is talking to people after church about how won't be long now. Won't be long now. Could happen in 65, maybe 1968. Definitely by 1972, it's all going to be over and we're going to flee to Petra, and that's it. Now, I didn't hear that from Mr. Armstrong. There were warnings from Mr. Armstrong, but not dogmatic, this is the way it is. And then you started hearing people say, well, Franz Joseph Strauss is the beast, and Henry Kissinger is the beast, and the United Nations is the beast power, and it just goes on and on and on. Well, 72 came and went. 85 came and went. 90 has come and gone. Now we're in 2000. Remember, I forget all the details, that when 2000 got here, there was some kind of computer problem, and the computers weren't programmed to make the change, and it was going to just default all over the world, and it's over. It didn't happen. Here we are. But you know what? We still have people who are still setting dates, who are still assigning names to different personalities in the world, and other people believing them. We don't know any of that. But I want to go through a few things that we do know. Shouldn't we be concentrating on the things that we know rather than on the things that we don't know? I can't get people to be excited about the things that we know, but I tell you, I can get them raring and stirred up and really roaring over things that we don't know. Now, how's that for an irony? An oxymoron? A conundrum? I know all those words. I looked them up. Let's look at some things that we know. That's what interests me. You know something that doesn't interest me, and it never has? Speculation has never interested me. You know why? Because when it's all said and done, we still don't know anything. Tell me something we know. Teach me something that we can prove. I want to know practical information. Now, I can't go through the whole list. You can add to the list. But here are some things that we know right from the Bible. We know that we are heading into a time of trouble for the U.S. and Britain. Let's turn to Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 7. Jeremiah 30 and verse 7. And it's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. And it's going to be primarily on the United States and Britain. And I'll tell you why. The birthright promises and the blessings that God gave to Abraham were passed on to Isaac, who then passed them on to Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. But he passed these birthright promises on to Joseph, who then passed them on to Ephraim and Manasseh. And Manasseh is the United States of America, and Ephraim is the British Empire. And so when you read about Jacob's trouble, yes, it's going to happen on all 12 tribes, but primarily on the U.S. and Britain. And look at it here. Jeremiah 30 and verse 7. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. He's not going to be utterly destroyed. Jacob's trouble. When you start looking at the trouble in the Western world, and in particular in the United States and Britain, each year the quagmire gets deeper. It just does. But we don't know how much longer it'll go on. It could go on another 10 years, 20 years. Who knows? Only God knows. He's going to get his work done. It could be quicker than anybody thinks. We don't know. And here's a headline for every newspaper in all of the U.S. and Britain, but it won't be published. Are you ready? Front page. We don't need to know. We don't need to know. If we needed to know, God would show us, and he will when we need to. But will there be trouble coming, even more than has already come in the last few years? Yes, and in the future, more and more and more trouble. I catch myself cheering for the U.S., hoping, pulling, but I'm wasting my time because the prophecies are going to be fulfilled and are being fulfilled. But you can't assign dates and names and predictions to particulars. You just have to watch, and God will keep us where we need to be kept in his church moving forward as we watch and stay on our toes. Second thing we know that disaster is coming for Israel, parentheses, Judah. The country that's called Israel today is actually Judah, and they are headed for a disaster. We know that's going to happen. Let's turn to Hosea chapter 5. Hosea 5 and verse 13. Just think about this little country of Israel and all of the troubles they have had throughout the years that they've been a nation. Surrounded by enemies on all sides. Very small country. As I remember, it's 80 miles from north to south, and in some places, 10, 15 miles across. It's a small country, but potent. It's feared around the world. but especially in the Middle East. It has one of the most powerful militaries on earth. It seems like that nation could never be defeated. See, its citizens are all citizen soldiers. They're all ready to enter into war at any time, so that you have a standing army of hundreds and thousands of people instantly, led by a well-trained military. But that's not going to keep it from a disaster in the future. It says here in Hosea chapter 5 and verse 13, when Ephraim saw his sickness, and Ephraim is sick, and Judah saw his wound, and he will be wounded, then went Ephraim to the Assyrian and sent to King Jareb, yet could he not heal you, nor cure you of your wound. When is that wound going to come? That devastating body blow? We don't know. Where's it going to come from? We don't know. But we do know it's coming. And when it comes, it'll be a devastating disaster, the likes of which that little country has never experienced before. So let's keep watching. Let's notice Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. Luke 21 and verse 20. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, or surrounded with armies, then know you that the desolation thereof is near. See, the time is coming in the future when powerful armies are going to come down into that area and totally surround Jerusalem. And there they'll be. And then they will invade, and the abomination of desolation will take place. That's in the future. That's coming. We know that. We better be watching. Notice verse 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down, trampled down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. See, we're now in a time where the times of Israel are waning off the face of the earth, and the times of the Gentiles are rising. And so there's a power shift underway from the descendants of Israel to the Gentiles. Take a look. You see it happening. It doesn't bode well for the little nation of Israel when you consider that. And that's what verse 24 says. Jerusalem shall be trampled underfoot of the Gentiles. That's going to happen. Another thing that we know will take place is there will arise a powerful personality called the King of the North. There will also arise a powerful personality called the King of the South. The King of the North is described in the Bible as the beast in Europe, leading the beast power, which will be the political, military, and economic might of Europe, and that's going to be the King of the North. The King of the South will be the leader of Arab countries, and he will be powerful, and they will be powerful, militarily, economically, and politically. And so you're going to have two power blocks there, building. The Bible says so. Now, who will be the King of the South? We don't know. These addiction people said it was Saddam Hussein. He's gone. Now I think they're saying it's Iran or Ahmadinejad. Did I say it right? But they're saying it's Iran and the leader of Iran. We don't know who the King of the South will be, and we don't know who the King of the North will be. But we know there will be a King of the North, and there will be a King of the South. It's going to come. So we've got to be watching. And let's see what Daniel 11 has to say about it. Let's turn to Daniel 11. Daniel 11 and verse 40. Look at Daniel 11 and verse 40. Isn't it interesting the way the Bible clarifies the time frame in which it's speaking? It does so often. It says here in Daniel 11 and verse 40, at the time of the end. So now, when will the King of the North and the King of the South clash? When will they come into prominence? At the time of the end. At the time of the end shall the King of the South push at him, meaning the King of the North. And the King of the North shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. And he shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. You got to put oil in there somewhere. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Look at this tremendous war that's taking place here between the king of the north and the king of the south. Now, I've given some thought to this, and you take a look at the upheaval that's taking place now in the Middle East, especially in the Arab world. And so you have these dictators that have been in power 20, 30, 40 years, and now from the population, there's an uprising that is toppling one after the other after the other. However, what this does is create a vacuum. What leader's going to step in that vacuum? And it could run for a number of years. Are we seeing the stage set so that it'll be ripe for a personality, a powerful leader, to come on the scene and capture the imagination of the Arab world and begin to create cohesion where they come together, and thus the king of the south is on the scene? I don't know, but I see the possibilities. So that's why we have to watch. See, where there is upheaval and instability, there is a vacuum. So an opportunity is created for people to go into that vacuum and establish a regime, a government, a leader. This could go back and forth and up and down for a while. But what I think we're seeing is the stage being set in various places in the world so that sometime down in the future, it's going to be ripe for what we are reading in the Bible and the events and personalities that we find there to come on the scene. And this could go on for a while, but we know it's going to happen, so we have to keep watching. Verse 44, but tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many, and utterly to annihilate many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Between the seas in what is known today as Israel. In other words, Jerusalem, and establishes headquarters there. That's coming. Let's watch. These uprisings and these revolutions that are happening in so many of the Arab countries are not a minor thing. Who would have thought that this would take place? That there would be an uprising that would loosen the grip of these dictators that had the military and the intelligence forces to maintain their power. Who would have thought that people could go to the streets and dislodge them and send them packing? I wouldn't have thought it, but it's happened. There's trouble in Yemen. There's trouble in Tunisia. There's trouble in Egypt. There's trouble in Libya. There's trouble in Syria. There's trouble in Iran. There's trouble in Jordan, big trouble in Jordan. Who's next? What's it all about? Why is this happening? We could see the stage being set to create fertile ground for the king of the south to come on the scene down the road. We know it's going to happen. We don't know who or when. We don't need to, but we need to watch. Here's something else we know will take place. We know that there will be a false prophet arise, leading a false church. Let's turn to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 1. It might be hard to comprehend why anybody would be taken in by this person, but when you read this, I think we'd understand a little bit better. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 1. Now we beseech you, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and concerning our gathering together with him. So that tells you the time frame. That you be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled neither by spirit nor by word nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Don't let it shake you up. It's got to come. Just be prepared. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Well, that falling away has occurred, and next comes the man of sin, perdition, false prophet, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, and trying to get people to believe that. Remember you not that when I was yet with you I told you these things, and now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. Who is this going to be? I have heard people conclude that this pope is the one. Look at his eyes, and then he dies. Then the next pope is the one. Look at the decisions he's making. Then he dies. Then the next pope is the one. After all, he's an Italian. And then he dies. I think I told you about the time we were in Regina, and I was going through some of this, and a pope had been installed in office. And I said, we don't know how long this pope will be there. When God gets ready, he could die tonight, and he could be replaced. And he did die that night. And I started getting calls. What else do you know that we don't know? I just made that statement. We don't know when that man of sin will be revealed or who he will be. But we know it's coming. So we got to watch. And look what he's going to do. Look what it says here. 2 Thessalonians 2 and verse 8. Then shall that wicked one, that lawless one, be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan. And what is he able to do? With all powers and signs and lying wonders. That's what he's going to be able to do. That's how he's going to be able to deceive so many people, calling fire down out of heaven. And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. That's coming. Next point. This is going to be done and is being done. The work will be finished. Nobody can keep it from happening. And the church will be ready. We know that. And we don't know how big the work will get. We don't know how big the church will get. But we know the church will be ready and the work will be done. This we know. Let's notice Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14. Matthew 24:14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. And published. Did you know that's happening now through the internet? It's going everywhere. It's going in places I never thought it would possibly get into. But it's going. Matthew 24 verse 14 is taking place. Let's turn to Revelation chapter 19 and verse 7. Revelation 19 and verse 7. It says in Revelation 19 and verse 7, let us be glad and rejoice, and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. Remember, I said we know the church will be ready. It's getting ready. God is seeing to it. It's getting back on track. People are praying. They're studying. They're overcoming and growing. The humility, the dedication, the steadiness, the insatiable desire for the truth. It's getting ready. And it says here it will be ready. His wife has made herself ready, verse 8, and to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And he says unto me, write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said unto me, these are the true sayings of God. And the church will be ready. The next point that we know this. We know it. The true church will be taken to a place of safety. We know that. Do we know where? No. Do we know how we're going to get there? No. Do we know when we're going to go? No. But we know the church will be taken to a place of safety. Isn't that what counts? Now, Mr. Armstrong said if it's not Petra, I don't know where it is, but he never said it was going to be Petra for sure, and nobody knows if it's going to be Petra. Did you know that we might end up in a place of safety that nobody has thought of yet? And that might be where we're going to be taken for 3.5 years. We don't know. What we do know is there is a place of safety, and the church will be taken there. We know that. The rest, just speculation. How do we know it? Let's turn over here to Revelation chapter 12. Revelation 12 and verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Revelation 12 and verse 14. And to the woman, the church, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the face of the serpent, 3.5 years. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, armies, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Verse 16, and the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Ties right in with the Red Sea being opened up and swallowing up Pharaoh and his army, chasing physical Israel. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. And they were not taken to the place of safety. That's the Laodicean church. You know, just out of interest, this morning, I got my Bible that I had all the way through Ambassador College. And I knew this was there. And I flipped over to Revelation 12, and I remember Mr. Armstrong going through this whole thing carefully, and I wrote things in the margin. And that Bible I got in 1961, and we were at college from 61 to 65. And what I wrote in the margin, way back then, right here by verse 17, listening to Mr. Armstrong as he went through this, is this: Laodicean church. Laodicean church, verse 17. Left behind. We're not in the Laodicean era. We're in the Philadelphia era. The Laodicean era comes on the scene when the Philadelphia era is taken to the place of safety, and they're left behind. Then they form the Laodicean church, and therefore the Laodicean era. But the true church is going to be taken to the place of safety. Right here in this book of Revelation, chapter 3. We know this. And so as we're watching all of these horrendous things unfold in the world today, we can take tremendous heart to know that we who endure to the end and who grow and overcome and yield to God and continue in the church as the very elect are going to be taken to the place of safety. But not if we get careless, and not if we go to sleep spiritually. Notice Revelation chapter 3 and verse 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, These things says he that is holy, he that is true, he that has the key of David, he that opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. I know your works. Behold, I've set before you an open door, and no man can shut it. For you have a little strength, and you've kept my word, and you have not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, hopefully, to wake up and to know that I have loved you. Verse 10, Because you have kept the word of my patience, I also will keep you from the hour of temptation or tribulation, which shall come upon the whole world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly, hold that fast which you have, that no man take your crown. This we know. The last point we have time for is we know that there will be two witnesses. While the church is in hiding in the place of safety, God will have two witnesses that carry on witnessing to the whole world. Let's notice here in Revelation chapter 11, verse 1. Revelation 11, verse 1, And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city they shall trod under foot 42 months. All of this takes place in 3.5 years. The church is in the place of safety. For 3.5 years, the two witnesses carry out their responsibilities for 3.5 years, and Jerusalem is trodden under the foot of the Gentiles for 3.5 years. And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues, as often as they will. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. Who are these two witnesses? We don't know. But we know there will be two. I've met at least 3 of these two witnesses who said they were. Well, we don't know who these two witnesses are, but we know they're coming. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. I used to hear all kinds of speculation. Well, I know who the two witnesses are. We don't know. But we know they'll be on the scene when the time comes. The beast shall overcome them and kill them, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified, meaning Jerusalem. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. They're going to be so happy about it. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these 2 prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. See, the time is coming when there will be 2 more prophets. The Philadelphia era will be in the place of safety, and these men will be prophets. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. I call this the uh-oh moment. All of this fun-making, and there they lie dead, and then God raised them up. Not so good. Those that made fun are now in trouble. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them, and they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up here, and they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. In other words, they're going to be in the first resurrection at the appropriate time. So those are some of the things we know, and none of the things we went through here was speculation, except I brought up a couple of possibilities. Basically, we can know what we went through and prove it. So now, very quickly, knowing what we know and understanding a little bit more about what we don't know, nor do we need to know, what should we be doing? What should we be doing? We should go on living life to the full. We should be living the abundant life. We should be growing and overcoming and changing. We should be enjoying every day with our families. We should be walking closer and closer with God. We should be letting our light shine brighter and brighter. And specifically now, we should be doing this. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 1. Verse 1 of 1 Thessalonians 5. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. You are all the children of light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of the darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober, spiritually speaking. Watch and be sober. These are sobering times. Watch and be sober. Take note. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet the hope of salvation. For God has not appointed us to wrath, the great tribulation, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Wherefore, comfort or encourage yourselves together, and edify one another. Encourage and inspire and comfort and help one another, knowing all these things, even as also you do. So all of us need to take a look and wake up, or if we are already awake, we need to make sure that we stay awake. Next point, 2 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 5. You know, the examination of our spiritual condition should not take place solely and only prior to taking the Passover. It should be a regular thing without persecuting ourselves and being hard on ourselves and ending up discouraged about ourselves, but simply examining and taking a look and say, okay, I've made progress there and there. I need to make more progress over here. And considering what's going on in the world, maybe a little more urgency into this examination process would be good. 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 5, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. Are you growing in the faith? Prove your own selves. Know you not your own selves, how that Jesus Christ is in you, except you be reprobate. So take a look and admit what you see, if it's good or if it's bad, and then build on it if it's good and change it if it's bad, and God will help us. Next thing, 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 2. 1 Peter 2 and verse 2, as newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word, that you may grow thereby. This doesn't mean that we are new in the church. This means that as a newborn babe cannot get enough of mother's milk, and that's what they want. And they want to nurse regularly and a lot, and they love it, and they want more of it. They want that nutrition. They want that nourishment. We need to have that kind of appetite for the Word. So he's saying, as newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the Word. Why? That you may grow thereby. If so be you have tasted that the Lord is gracious, to whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious. You also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house, and the ministers are an holy priesthood, and later on all who are resurrected will be kings and priests, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. So let's wake up and stay awake as we watch and keep it in perspective. Let's examine ourselves and change what we need to change and build on what we don't. And then let's set out to grow and progress spiritually by walking with God and keep on growing. And finally, let's make sure that we don't fall into this trap. Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9. Galatians 6 and verse 9, and let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not, if we don't lose heart. We can't let that happen. We can't become so familiar and so used to the truth and so distracted by other things that seem so exciting that we begin to just get tired of services, tired of the Word, tired of hearing sermons, tired of studying the Bible. We begin to just get bogged down and loaded down with so many things that we grow weary with well-doing and begin to lose heart. If we see any of those kind of things starting to show up in our life, this is where examining ourselves comes in, and we identify those things and we get rid of them. We overcome them. I don't see verse 9 showing up in the Enduring Church of God yet, and I don't ever expect it to show up. What I see is eagerness and zeal and enthusiasm. We've got to keep that going. But we also got to make sure that as we see the times in which we're living, and as we see the needs of carrying out the calling that God has given us, we don't become diverted and distracted and loaded down to where we start to grow weary. We can't let that start to intrude into our lives. We have to remember this warning, Galatians 6 and verse 9. This is what we can do about what we see going on around us, and about the times in which we're living, and about how we then can keep moving toward the kingdom. Let us not be weary in well-doing. Talk to God about it. Go to God about it. Look to God. He'll hear. He'll answer. He'll help. He'll respond. Let us not be weary in well-doing, and keep this in mind. For in due season, the time is coming, for in due season we shall reap. We shall realize all that we long for and hope for and yearn for and are moving toward. We shall reap, but only if we faint not, only if we don't lose heart.